It only took
Hi.
about 5 tries, but
There we got there.
yeah. I'm more calm about it now that I've done this a few times. The first time when it's not working. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Thank you
Oh
for
my
inviting me.
goodness. My goodness. What an honor and a joy. And introducing to the oh my goodness, lots of people joining in. Charlotte
Hello,
Botterill,
everybody.
the composer from the UK. You live somewhere near or north of London, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. I live in St Albans, which is, yeah, Hertfordshire. It's about 25 miles or so north of London,
right. Excellent.
so not far. Nice and quick and easy to get in on the train. Only
Oh,
takes
that's
sort of
handy.
20
Excellent.
minutes, half an hour. Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. I have a little habit lately. The escapist habit is to watch Escape to the Country videos.
Yep. Yep.
So I'm getting a good grounding in UK geography. I mean, I had a
We're
sense
sort
already,
of
but
the kind of area I live in looks a little bit more like that sort of country kind of look
oh,
that you
nice.
get in the Escape to the Country.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
The chocolate box thing we talked about.
Yeah, there's one of those nearby. Yeah.
So, Charlotte, just to tell people you're from there, I don't know if that's where you grew up as well, but tell us
Yeah.
about your musical training, your background, your role models, influences.
So yeah, I did grow up there. I've lived in St Albans all my life. It's quite a nice town. Um, I grew up kind of around music all the time. So my mum was a piano teacher,
Mine
and she
too.
taught me to there we go. We all have our piano teacher mothers.
Yeah.
And she taught me to play the piano when I was quite young, when I was very small. So I've always had that, and I've always played the piano on and off throughout my life. My dad was a Hammond organ engineer. It's quite a niche job, not many of those around.
Wow.
So on the other side, then we always, yeah, had a lot of music from his side of things as well. Um, and he'd always take me and my sister to his various different jobs that he had to do.
Fun.
Because he'd travel around and go to all sorts of like studios or churches or venues for concerts and things. And we went with him to those. So we saw all this other side of music as well when we were quite young too.
Wow,
But
fun.
I probably had a slightly more unconventional musical education in a way because I was sort of taught at home. I did quite a bit of like self-teaching as well. I did the standard sort of study music at school, sort of GCSE and A level kind of thing. And I didn't want to go to university straight away after school because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I worked in a music shop for a couple of years, and then I decided that I quite like composing. Well, I'd like to learn more about composing. I still didn't know that I wanted to be a composer and didn't have any intention to go into anything like that, but it was interesting to me. So I just thought, well, I'll just go with what's interesting and with what I
Great.
like and enjoy. So I went to university and studied music composition. I went to Brunel, which is in London.
Ah,
It's
yes.
in West London, and studied there and under Colin Riley. He was my main composition tutor. And then, yeah,
And here you
the
are.
rest is history. Here I am. Yep.
Just we'll talk about this training. Just back to the piano teacher mother thing
Yeah.
that we have in common. Did you end up having to like be self-taught like I was because the lessons often ended in cry sessions, or were you
I
a
don't think
lovely
so.
good daughter and just went along with it?
I don't know. You probably have to ask my mum if I was a lovely good daughter, but I don't remember them ending badly. I
Oh, that's
think
all
they were
good.
okay. But I
No,
did a lot of
not not that
just a lot of
mine always
self-teaching
ended that
because
way, but like it's
yeah.
hard. It's hard as a parent to find
Mm.
the time also, right? To
Yeah.
keep
I
the
think
regular schedule.
I think that was where my self-teaching came in.
Yeah,
It was the time, so I just sort
yeah,
of when there was time, I'd just kind of go and help myself to books, and you
exactly.
wouldn't know
Oh,
what the note was, and I'd be like, I have no idea what this is like. 4 ledger lines underneath the stave, so I'm just sitting there work it all out, like, oh,
yeah.
and eventually it sticks,
And a lot of it
that
you
kind
would
of
have
thing.
been hearing from your
Yeah.
mother teaching it. So yeah. Oh, that's so
Yes,
fun that we
exactly.
share
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a particular
Um,
tribe.
yes, definitely. I think the other reason I did quite a lot of self-teaching is because as a teenager, I didn't really like classical music. I wasn't really interested in that. I loved everything from the 60s and the 70s. So I just spent a lot of
Ah,
time printing off chord sheets because we didn't have YouTube then.
no,
YouTube
of
wasn't
course
quite
not.
a thing yet.
No.
So I spent a lot of time just printing off chord sheets with lyrics to whatever songs I liked by like Queen or David Bowie or whoever. And then learning the chords and then learning how to put in like learning the melody line by ear and putting that in and then trying to realize that into some chords and then trying to realize a bass line with that and all sorts of things like that. So
Ah,
that was
so
kind of
was
my
that
self-teaching.
also then by doing that was kind of a gateway to the composition
I think so.
interest? Yeah,
Yeah, I
interesting.
definitely think so because it was sort of I always sort of thought in chords that would then
Hmm.
like from that. So when I came to do my first lot of composing for like GCSE music and A level music and things, I found that of other people in my class, even though I considered them to be better musicians than me, I seemed to find it easier to go about the composing tasks, and they all found it much more daunting. Whereas I was quite happy to sort of sit down and plonk some chords out and then try and make a melody line which fitted and things like that. So
Yeah, oh, that's a
yeah,
neat route. So that
yeah,
was
it's a bit different.
around like when you can safely say this was my first composition. When around was that? Like how old were you?
um, I think probably around, yeah, I think I probably had to first compose for school, so GCSE, so I'd be about 15, I think.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think when I was very, very, very little, like 6 years old, you had
Oh
your
yeah.
little sort of one-handed doodle things. I'm not really going to count those,
Yeah.
but I did do those. I found them a few years ago, and I thought,
Oh,
oh, and I'd put a time signature and everything. I was very good.
oh
But
nice.
yeah, I think about 15 is probably when I had to do my first composition, and I yeah, wrote a blues sort of style
Okay.
piece. So we had to write them in a particular style that we were studying as part of our
Right.
music GCSE. And so I went for the blues and I wrote this 12 bar blues kind of thing.
Fun.
That would be my
And
first. That was
did
my
you
first one probably.
did you feel like confident in
No,
sharing it?
no, no.
At what point would you say you became confident in sharing your compositions?
I still don't think I am.
Well, you
I
offered your nocturne to us. That's a certain level of confidence.
I
I
know.
mean, you have a website, you have like lots of musicians playing your music. So,
Yeah, I know. I think it was probably the last couple of years.
yeah.
Yeah, the last couple of years or so. And whenever I write something new, when I first send it out to somebody, I'm like a bit like, oh God, what's the response gonna be? Is this gonna be
Okay.
terrible? And I'm still like scared to send it to people, but I know that I have to get past that and just, you have to send it. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like mind over matter in a way, I suppose. But I wouldn't say I go, yes, I can't wait to send this to people. I kind of go, oh, I've written a thing. Suppose I should send it to people then. It's more
That's
the whole
so good to
process.
hear that. I mean, I'm not a I don't call myself a composer, although I have composed. I have actually even been commissioned, but um,
I think you can call yourself a composer as well, though.
uh, I don't know. But I promised publicly on Twitter that this recent thing that I did, which was a lovely commission and a very cool project, I promised I would share it at some point once the commissioning thing was done. I don't see how I can share it. It's like, because it all makes sense in your head, and
Yeah,
even when you play it to yourself. But then it's like, am I stupid? Like, is this a thing? I just can't imagine.
no, I know exactly what you mean, and I feel the same whenever I write something. Like I did an album last year in lockdown of a
Hmm.
load of piano miniatures composed in isolation, and it was all just about experiences in isolation, how we, how
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of feeling through the isolation and everything. And it makes perfect sense to me. Um, but when I first sent out a few pieces to people, I was a bit sort of like, oh, I don't know if anyone else is going to see this. But then they did. And then so many of them said completely like, I really identified with this piece and this piece of
Right.
music. So I thought, oh, okay, good. And that makes
Okay.
me feel a bit better. And,
Yeah, just a
it's
little
when
bit
you
of
get things like
feedback.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it just
see
makes you feel a bit more confident in sending things out.
my former student Miles, hi, has just mentioned this idea of imposter syndrome. And yeah, I don't know that it's even that though, as much as like the thing has just been living internally in you. And
Mm,
then like when you put it out in the world, it's different. It's just completely
yeah, it's
I, I just made this up and now I have to vouch for it, you know?
yeah, exactly. I know what you mean. It's very much like it's if it's something that's very personal, I find it
Hmm.
quite hard to put it out because it's sort of like so much part of me, and
Right.
then it's really, I don't know, I find it quite sort of difficult to then send out something, a part of myself which is so vulnerable into the world, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
exactly. Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, now everyone's going to know something quite personal about myself through music.
Right.
And that's,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
quite hard. But I guess we all have to be vulnerable sometimes, don't we? And we just have to kind of
Well, I
go
mean,
on from.
that's where the strength is, you know, in a way, right?
Yeah.
So,
But on the imposter syndrome, very quickly,
mhm.
I had that for, I mean, I probably still do because I still don't really feel like I belong in a composer kind of bubble or anything either. But yeah, I very much identify with that. I think I'm a big imposter syndrome person.
Well, here's
So
another
yeah.
nice bit of positive feedback from Barry Paul H. The Isolation
Oh,
album
hi,
was
Barry.
great.
Thank you. Nice
Yeah.
to see you here as well.
Oh, so great. So, can you talk about like how it gets from in your head onto a paper or onto
Hmm.
your computer screen and then out into the world? Like, what's your process for coming up with stuff?
So it's kind of it's sort of slightly different. I always start to compose at the piano with manuscript and pencil because I'm quite old school. I like that better. I feel like I focus better. Once I tried to compose straight into Sibelius, but I found that because I had this huge empty page with all the bars laid out, I was trying to
Oh,
fill
yeah.
up bars rather than trying to create something which was
Mhm.
like musically good, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to start with pen and paper, and I start at the piano. Often, most of the time, I improvise at the piano, and I see what comes out of that, and I'll just sort of noodle around for ages and see what kind of, if I get anything I like or what sort of ideas come out. That's usually if I don't have any kind of concept, I would
Uh-huh.
say. If I'm just sort of like, oh, I'm going to write something, I'll sort of sit down and do that. So with my isolation album from last year, that's sort of exactly what happened. I was just in a bad mood and I sat down and I kind of just like played my bad mood and I was like, here we go. I'll write that down.
Uh-huh.
But for other pieces, if I have a concept that I want to convey, then that shapes the improvisation beforehand, and I'll sort of set out some sort of aims that I want the piece to have before I start. So, for example, at the moment, I'm working on some flute miniatures using various different contemporary techniques like singing and playing and percussive
Cool.
sounds and different breath sounds and that kind of thing.
That
And
sounds
each
cool.
one of those is quite cool, actually. I'm enjoying doing them, and the research has been really interesting. Um, so each one of those is themed around a different landscape. So I've kind of set out what I want the music, how I want the music to portray the landscape in a way, and then I sort of improvise to find the first kind of musical themes in a way. And
Uh-huh.
then as I develop those, I'm sort of checking back to make sure that I'm including these other things that I want to include. So, for example, the one I'm working on at the moment is a sort of mountainous type of one. I think I'm going to call it peaks. Um, but so I'm thinking about kind of like wind sounds and air sounds to start with, because thinking if you're being on top of a mountain, it's often quite windy, and also sort of jagged sort of shapes and high notes mixed, very high leaps mixed with lower notes and lower sort of melodies, that kind of thing. What else am I putting in at the moment? A lot of sort of percussive sounds, almost close to beatboxing, but not quite. So it's a lot of that sort of thing. So at the moment, I've got various different motifs and ideas, and now I'm just sort of trying to weave them all together. And then once I've got what I think is going to be the majority of the piece laid out, then I usually step away for a while. I'll have a day or a couple of days away from it. So just to get some distance and get a bit of perspective.
Good idea.
And then, because otherwise, you get so close up to something and you get so involved in it, then you lose all sense of perspective.
Right.
And then after that, what I'll do is I'll either come back and play it all through and try and, see what I've missed or see where I've overdone something. Or if I'm writing something a little bit more conventional, like if I'm writing a piano piece or something like that, once I've fleshed out the whole piece, then I write it out onto Sibelius or Dorico. I've started using Dorico quite recently, and that's quite nice as well.
Oh, good.
Interested.
Plug for Dorico.
Then I'll play it back and I'll listen to it play back on the computer, just for again a sort of balance. Like, are the phrases equally balanced? Is that kind of thing? Is it weighted? Are the different sections weighted right? And then I find that I listen differently when I'm not playing it. So that's why I like to listen to the computer play it back, because if I'm playing it back, my head is still very much like, I know what it's going to sound like, so I'm kind of ignoring what I'm doing. Whereas if I listen to something more mechanical play it back, then I listen in a different way.
That makes sense, yeah.
Process. Then I'll go through and fix anything that needs fixing. And if anything's, unbalanced here or there, add in something else. If there's something, a question which doesn't have an answer or anything like that, or if I've done this, repeated the same thing too many times, or I feel I've repeated it, or it's too similar, these sorts of little things, little details, that kind of thing. That's kind of basically my process.
It's so interesting it sounds like you have kind of a visual impetus, at least in this project with the landscapes. Is that kind of how your mind works? Like you sort of see shapes and sounds and colors and
not I wouldn't say colours, not colours in the sort of synesthesia sort of way.
No.
Kind of in a sort of timbrel kind of way. Not literal colours. But I like to have some sort of like programmatic kind of thing for my music. I find it hard to just write music for the sake of music. So there's always some sort of meaning. There's always got to be a reason for the piece for me.
Yeah.
So I'm either composing something which is sort of like we talked about earlier, something which is quite personal, sort of an emotional, personal sort of thing, or something that represents something visual, I guess. Yeah.
A scene or a story or a character or something.
Yeah.
So I'm just really interested in this, making that leap from improvisation to composition. I guess that was your inclination when you were feeling crummy, to sit down and improvise. Do you do quite a bit of that? Just sit down at the piano and
and so all the time.
So there's then this kind of improvisation, composition, and then the Venn diagram. What kind of, can you describe what that is? Like, how do you know that this part of the improvisation is going to become part of the composition? Is that tricky to?
How do I know? I don't know. So you just sort of know, don't you?
Yeah. It just feels like
helpful.
It feels like that's the good bit, so I'll do it.
Yeah. I think for me, if it flows and if I'm not working too hard, then that's a good sign. So
Hmm.
some of the pieces that I like the best, like the Nocturne, which I sent to you guys, the
Yeah.
first 6 bars of that was just an improvisation. Um,
Ah,
and it just came literally as I sent it to you. That's literally how it came out, and I wasn't
wow.
thinking about it. I wasn't concentrating. I just sat down and played, and that's what happened. I sort of changed one or two things just to make, color the chords slightly more, but yeah,
So
that was
did
it.
you did you record your improvisation? Like, how did it then get from it just flowed out of you to being on paper? In
Luckily, I managed to remember it and play it back
wow,
enough times.
what
So
a
it
clever
was only sort of 6 bars.
what
So
a clever one you are.
I managed to remember those 6 bars. I kind of
Okay.
remembered the melody, and I
Yeah.
knew what kind of chords were going with it.
Yeah.
And then I wrote it down. That's why. So I really should record things more because I never do. And then you play something amazing. I'm like, yes, that's the thing. I want that. And then
Yeah.
I have no idea what it
Shit,
was.
what
It's
was
gone.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just gone.
exactly.
So
That
usually if I find something I like, I play it again and again and again and again, and then I
aha.
write it down.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That opening of that nocturne, it's so beautiful. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
thank
it
you.
just sort of it just is so expressive and direct. By the way, I wonder if I can just paste links into here. Oh, yes. It's going to work. Maybe. Paste? No. I thought it was clever and copied links ahead of time to both um, your website and also to the recording
Oh,
on piano music she wrote so YouTube, but it doesn't work that way. You can't just
oh,
paste it in. Darn
that's
it.
very annoying.
Oh, if Erica, if you're around, I don't know, Erica. No, she was busy, so maybe not. Okay. Anyway, we'll put that in the caption under the
Yeah,
video later.
that's
Um,
good.
so yeah, that piece. It's now a couple years ago you wrote it. That Nocturne in E major.
Mm.
Um, do you remember what was going on in your life and heart and soul?
Yeah,
To
I
is it
do.
too personal
I
to
do.
ask?
Um, I was sort of, thinking about friendships and relationships. Maybe that's probably all I'll say about that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of thing. Just thinking about those and reflecting on those.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and how they develop or don't, as the case may be,
Yeah.
over time and that kind of thing. But the interesting thing, which I find most interesting about that piece, is um, I wrote the intro, the beginning, those first 6 bars, and after that, I just couldn't do anything with it at the time. I just didn't know what was going to come next. I couldn't figure out. So it stayed that way for a year. And I had to leave it
Ah.
for a whole year because every time I went back to it, every sort of like couple of weeks or so, I still couldn't find anything good.
Ah.
And maybe it took me that long to sort of process whatever I was thinking about at the time. But
Right.
yeah, I came back a year later and then I just composed the rest of it in about a week.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like if the theme or the first 6 bars came with such flow in an improvisatory, that's not how you pronounce it, way, it makes sense that then when you tried to extend it, the trying
Mm.
might have gotten in the way, and you
I
just
think
needed
so,
to
yeah.
surrender it and then just come back to it and let it flow further.
Yeah.
Has its
Yeah,
own
definitely.
little life there, I guess.
I think
Yeah.
so, yeah. I think that's another thing which I think is quite interesting when I come to composers. Sometimes I find that if I'm trying too hard for a piece, it just won't work.
Hmm.
And sometimes what I'm intending to write isn't necessarily what comes out.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's quite an interesting thing to be aware of and think about as well. And I think it's quite important to sometimes remember that we have to just if something else is happening, we have to just let the music, flow, let the music shape itself, let the music
Oh yeah.
take us where it's going rather than fighting against it.
Oh, that's so encouraging to hear you say that. I know this is not about me, this talk, but it just it just relates to this piece that I'm still a little not sure I'm going to share with the world. But this commission, like I had 2 years because the pandemic interfered with the timing of it and everything. And at the first year and a half of trying to get this thing done, I had all these like pieces of paper with these chords and these ideas and this variation and that, and all these sketches, tons of them, and inside the piano techniques, and it was just getting, and then it just felt like that though. It was just so much about trying to be clever or trying to make sure the person got their money's worth from commissioning me, whatever it was. And then with the pandemic, all kinds of conditions interrupted, like the idea of using the inside of the piano was not possible because I didn't have access to a grand piano, and all kinds of stuff like that. And then finally there was like could you have this to me like in a month? Oh, yeah, sure, of course. It's almost done. And I just sat down, and it was in that sort of improvisatory, flowy place where I just surrendered the whole thing, and a whole new thing came out.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know if it's legit good or not. It doesn't matter. It's just what happened, and that's what the piece became. And it was just like I had to get all that crap out of my system and out of the way, and then it just came, and then it was like done in a few hours.
Yeah, it's
after
amazing
fussing for a year and a half. So
I think that's it. It's sometimes we have to sort of be true to ourselves and whoever we are as composers, rather than trying to make things overly complicated and try not to compare ourselves to other composers. Because I do that all the time. I listen to other people's work and I think, wow, that's so clever, or this is really cool. Oh, I wish I could do that. I'll try and do this, but it just doesn't quite work. Or, you feel like you're trying to be not quite who I am as a composer. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there is something to be said for just letting our own personalities come through the music.
Oh, that's so encouraging to hear you speak that way.
It's taken me a long time to realize it.
You need to write a book, Charlotte. Get out of your way and just let it flow.
Someone will like it somewhere.
I won't need to read it because I already know now from you and having experienced it. But you being a pianist first in your life, I guess that's your most common expression, or do you write for other combos, other instruments? Like
piano is probably my most common thing I write for, probably just because it's the easiest and well for me.
The most direct. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. And often when I sit down to improvise, because you're a pianist, it comes out quite pianistic. So. Yeah. It just becomes a piano piece.
Right.
But yes, I do write for other things. A few years ago, I started writing for a local orchestra. They're sort of like a leisure time orchestra, just for fun kind of orchestra. And they commissioned me to do a couple of short pieces for a couple of their concerts. So yeah, that was nice. I've done some of those as well, and that was probably after I left university. That was probably the first time I properly got back into composing, when I started writing some things for them, because I was doing various other things after uni, and composing seemed to just sort of take a bit of a back burner, and I just didn't feel like I had quite as much time or purpose in a way. So there were a few years where I didn't really do much. I just kind of noodled around and researched for myself, but nothing really fully formed came out of it. So
well, the seeds were germinating underground, I guess.
Yeah.
So I noticed, was it from your website or somewhere, that you had a piece accepted into the Trinity syllabus, and I listened to that piece, Soho it's called.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Pianists watching, definitely try to take a listen and get your hands on it. It's a very cool piece.
Thank you.
How did that one come about? I mean, it was for a competition or?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was also after I'd written for the orchestra for a couple of years, then I started to feel a bit more confident in my, sending music out, as we were
Yeah.
talking about earlier, because people would, they play these pieces in the concerts, and then afterwards, random audience members I wouldn't know would just come up and go, "Oh, that was a very nice piece, really enjoyed that," and I was like,
Oh.
"Oh, okay, thank you, that's quite
Yay.
nice." So I think that sort of,
Yeah.
started to build up the confidence a bit. So I saw this young composers competition for the Trinity piano syllabus, and I thought, oh, okay, well, that's something that I could do. That's within my reach as, piano. I can do
Totally.
piano.
Yeah.
So I wrote it for that, basically. It's the name Soho is the Soho district in London. It's somewhere I really like in London. I think it's just really fun. And it's just got lots of good places to go out. It's got lots of restaurants and cocktail bars, and it's got Ronnie Scott's jazz club, which is like our famous jazz club, and somewhere I always go with my dad. He takes me to Ronnie Scott's quite a lot because he loves jazz. That's his thing. That's his music.
Yeah.
So that's got fond memories there. But
Ah.
an interesting thing about composing this piece, literally everything we've just sort of talked about, I started composing, I was trying to compose something completely different. And I was trying to be a little bit overly clever again. And it just sort of, I don't know, it wasn't really working. And then I had the kind of like, you'll know what I'm talking about because you've heard it, but I don't think anyone else will, that ba-da, ba-da, kind of bit. I had that. And I was just sort of playing it over and over, and I was thinking, what should I do next? And then I just played this sort of left-hand bass line, and I thought, oh, that sounds quite jazzy. And then I thought, okay, well, if this was like a jazz trio or a jazz quartet or something, and this is the upright bass, and this bit in the middle is the piano, what would happen next? I was like, I need some sort of high melody, something high has to happen. And then that brought in the higher right-hand part, and then I was like, oh, they've got this sort of quite jazzy piece going on, when I was actually intending to compose something much more sort of, I don't know, impressionistic and
like a nocturne or something.
yeah, something much more sort of, modern / impressionistic, that kind of thing. It's like jazz was not what I was going for, but it's just what came. So I thought, okay, so I just went with it.
Yeah.
And then after I had the first, I don't know, sort of minute or so, I thought, all right, well, this is it then, I'll keep going with this. And that first part came quite quickly. And then I titled it Soho. So I was like, this makes me think of jazz clubs. So that's where the title came from.
It's so satisfying the way you use the instrument in that piece. And
thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm personally, for decades I've been like, oh, I should have been a jazz pianist. I'll have to wait till next lifetime. Because I
feel the same.
Like, oh my gosh, we have so many things like parallel. But yeah, what you say about your dad, that's his music. In a way, I really get that. So yeah, I want to get my hands on that Soho. It's such a cool piece. Everybody go.
I can make that happen.
Go purchase it and play it. So cool. And
thank you.
Yeah. Grade 7, Trinity, I think if there are any Canadians here, I think we have a slightly different meaning to our levels. I think grade 7 Trinity would be more like grade 8, verging on 9 in our Canadian conservatory system. So
okay.
Yeah.
I think there's I don't know if you have that exam board in Canada or not. But there is because I know they're in various countries, but I'm not quite sure which ones.
Yeah, I actually did a Trinity. I actually did a Trinity licentiate exam in Canada years ago. So they do send examiners here.
Oh, fantastic! If anyone is interested in it, there's I think it's still available. It was available in a free ebook, which they put out at the start of the pandemic, just to try and encourage people to keep playing during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
I'll have a look at that, and I'll see if that page is still active, and if so, I'll put a link up later.
Okay, cool.
And have a look at that piece.
Nice.
Yeah, it was one of those interesting ones where when I was composing it, the first part again was really easy, and then I kind of got a bit stuck, and then it was quite because I had a deadline. It was
Oh
sort of
yeah.
like I have to keep going, have to keep going, and it was just sort of like, okay, what's going to come next? And I was sort of very much doing it kind of bar by bar, thinking about how's this bit going to go, what's this going to form into, and yeah, because I didn't have the time that I would normally have to step away and come back and step away and come back.
Right.
It became a bit more like, oh my God, is this going to get finished? Is it going to be any good? But yeah, it was fine.
I don't feel like in any way
Actually really pleased with it.
yeah, it doesn't sound in any way labored, like you had to
Oh,
fight
good.
for it. So
in places here and there. But no, it's one of my favorite pieces, I think, that
yeah,
I've written. I really like it.
yeah, it's very cool.
Thank you.
Love it.
It's kind of inspired me to do a whole collection of pieces based around different parts of London, which I like, have a connection with. So that's something that's also in the pipeline, along with my food miniatures.
Wow, nice. Well, that's a cool project. So, do you have any insights? Well, obviously, this has all been insights. Tips for budding composers, like the 15-year-old that you were, like what?
Yeah. I think my best thing, the things that I think helped me the most was I always picked apart everything I was playing. If I liked a sound, I would always pick it apart and analyze it, and I'd be like, why does this chord sound so satisfying here? What is in this chord? What's happened just before it leading up into it? Why do I like it so much? So I do a lot of that, and I just do a lot of looking at how chords go together and things like that. So I think that's quite helpful from a sort of, analysis point of view.
Sorry to interrupt, but that strikes me as like what a jazz musician does. Like listen to the solo of Mary Lou Williams and what is it that she did, and how did that work, and then build on that. It seems like your jazzer, your inner jazzer is at
it's all
work
that
there.
music. My dad always plays jazz. So when we were growing up, we heard jazz all the time. Jazz and Hammond and all good music, and just sort of like rock and stuff. So maybe it's that.
Yeah.
But I think that's quite helpful. The other thing which I did when I started composing for myself when I was young, which again I think is a helpful tool, is to just copy other people's styles, and then you learn how those styles work. So one of the first things, it's interesting you asked me earlier when I first wrote my first composition, but the first thing I can remember writing, which I didn't have to write, it was sort of for myself, was a little silly sort of Danny Elfman style piano waltz. What Midnight, I liked Tim Burton films. My sister, we like quite sort of like Halloween-y things, spooky things. So I'd watched Nightmare Before Christmas for the first time, and I was like, this is really interesting music. It doesn't go where you expect it to go. This is fascinating. Right. So then I went away and just improvised this little Danny Elfman-esque waltz. So that's quite nice. But yeah, compose in different styles, copy different people's styles and things. I think that's a good way to start. But then just give yourself time to try and develop your own voice, and that's the hardest part of composing, isn't it? Just trying to develop your own voice and your own style. I mean, I don't get too bogged down about the fact that maybe if you're young, you haven't found that yet. Don't get too caught up in that, because it will develop over time, and as you mature and as you grow and you learn more and you play more, it will happen.
And so it'll shift through life also.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, definitely it will change. But I think the other thing is just sort of believe in yourself. like it's taken some of us so long to do. And
exactly.
Don't get too worked up about comparing yourself to other people. Just sort of try and be proud of your own style and your own voice, and be confident in your own music. But
like you say, be inspired by other people and look into what makes that music of that person cool, or what makes that chord satisfying. So that leads me to like a question that I wanted to just see, I don't know how much music of historical women who composed you listen to or have played, but I think now certainly piano music she wrote, we're trying to shine the light on some women that should not have been ignored all those years.
Definitely.
So how does that feel, and like, does that make a difference to you as a woman composing now, that women of the past are now slowly getting exposure, and and if there's anyone in particular, like a historical composer, that you feel maybe somehow connected to or admire?
I think it's really interesting, because I think, like a lot of us, I've only sort of recently started discovering some of the historical female composers, and I don't know, like, it makes me, I'm kind of sort of, like a bit angry about the fact that there's so many of them were ignored for so long, and they really shouldn't have been, because there are so many fantastic composers.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, attitudes are starting to change and shift, but at the same time, from various different other forums and things or groups you're on, there still seems to be quite a lot of misconception about, oh, they weren't very good and that's why they haven't been included, and that kind of thing, which is just ridiculous. And you do just go listen to the music and then you'll hear that that's completely wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, you guys are doing fantastic work, and
thank you.
You've made it really, really easy and sort of accessible to go and find other
good.
female composers.
Okay.
And yeah, actually, from piano music she wrote, I think because I have been listening to all your sort of different playlists and things, and I actually really like Amy Beach. I think she's one of my favourites, and I can't believe that she's been sort of ignored for so long. And I find her, I really like her music. I find that I just connect with it very well. I don't know, something about it. Which ones do I like the most? Young Birches. I really like that piece.
Isn't that beautiful?
It was just so beautiful. And I think, what was another one? There was another sort of naturey kind of one. It was, again, beautiful, beautiful piece. Can't remember its title, but I listened to them all and I was just like, this is interesting. This music is beautiful and it's interesting, and it's just very, I don't really know the word for it is really, but it just really spoke to me. So,
and to think she was also like such a successful pianist. Her career as a pianist took her all over Europe, and yet,
why have her own compositions been ignored?
I know that because I've worked a lot with singers, and some of her songs have been kind of circulating for maybe longer than I had been aware of her other music. But yeah, that anger that you speak of is real, and it's hard not to get caught up in that. But it's we just do what we can, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
But
I was reading about her life as well, and I found it also quite interesting how she did a lot of self-study for composing, because nobody really wanted her to go into being a composer.
Right.
Because it wasn't really, I guess it wasn't ladylike or appropriate or whatever.
Her husband kind of gave her a little leeway to do a little bit musically, right? But he was also quite restrictive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I find that quite interesting as from a personal aspect to identify with that as well.
And that despite that, look what she's created.
I just think it's so, it's almost like she's seeing the world, the pieces that she's written about sort of trees and water and things. It's sort of like she's seeing it in a completely different sort of way to any other composer has. And
that's a good way to put it.
And I really identified with that, her sort of personal view of these things and how they come through in her music. And it's just so important to have these different people's voices and have a more diverse canon. in music,
Exactly.
so we don't end up with all the same sounding music. And people thinking,
Exactly.
this is the way it has to be. So this is what it should sound like. It's just,
Exactly.
yeah, I think I probably have identified with her music, the ones that I've listened to more than quite a lot of the composers I was brought up listening to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. The other composer who I really enjoy actually is Florence Price. I've been
Ah,
really
yeah.
liking her music because I love
Mm-hmm.
music which just mixes together lots of different styles and takes
Mm-hmm.
influences from different genres and things. And I
Mm-hmm.
love the way she takes sort of like folk tunes or sort of African American spirituals and that kind of thing, and then
Yeah.
combines them with classical traditions,
Yeah.
um, and the
Vocabulary.
blues
Yeah.
and those sorts of things. It's just fantastic. I love that. I find that kind of thing really interesting in music.
Yeah. Beautifully, beautifully written music.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to say regarding Amy Beach, um, we have this plan at some point. We will record them. There's these two pieces to do with the hermit thrush. Have you
Okay.
come across those?
I
It
don't think I
just
have yet.
it
No.
seems to connect to what you were saying.
Mm.
Her writing is so much about how she saw the world. Oh, such incredible pieces.
Oh, I
I
look
think
forward to
one
hearing
is
them.
hermit thrush at morning, and the other is at dusk or whatever it is. They're gorgeous pieces. But yeah,
Fantastic.
we tend to have to record things that are maybe a little shorter or a little quicker learns because we
Yes.
are putting out a video a week, each of
You've got
us.
you've got a lot of pieces
Yeah,
to do.
yeah. So at some point, we'll get those out because they're just gorgeous. And she was so prolific. There's so many pieces
Mm.
that we could enjoy
Yeah.
sharing. Yeah, and Florence Price as well. It's so exciting that Florence Price's music is now getting more available, accessible.
Yeah, definitely.
Like even 2
Definitely.
years ago, like where are the scores? And now
Yes.
now we're getting there.
Yeah.
Speaking of
It's really good.
scores,
Yeah.
where can we find your scores?
So you can find everything except for Soho that we've been talking about on my my sheet music store, which is payhip.com / I think it's just Charlotte Botterill. I wrote it down somewhere. Let me check. I don't actually know what my
But
URL is.
you can actually
But
get
there's a link to it on my website.
Yeah.
Yes, so you can get to it from my website.
As long as you know how to
And
spell Botterill, then you're good. Charlotte
yeah,
Botterill.
yeah,
Dot.
2 T's, 2 L's.
Right.
.com.
.com.
Yeah. And the Soho one, because it's part of the Trinity syllabus, that's only available from Trinity, their publications. So it's in the 2021 to 2023 grade 7 piano syllabus.
Okay.
And so you can buy it in that book, and I think you can get it as an ebook, like the whole syllabus. I think you can get as an ebook if you don't have a physical one. And I think that free book which I mentioned still exists, but we'll have to look into that. Hopefully that's not too noisy. I live on a really, really noisy road, so
Yeah.
hopefully the sirens are not coming
No
through
worries.
too much.
There's quite a few sirens here as well.
Okay, that's all right then.
Yeah, so it's just fascinating to hear all your ideas and insights and process, and it's just lovely to get to know you a little bit over the small little
nice
phone.
It's been nice to talk to you and find our similarities as well.
Yeah, it's funny how many parallels there are. But yeah, so I'm really grateful that you, first of all, made that initial contact to offer your nocturne to our Piano Music She Writes project, and just to remind people who do compose, send us the score if you'd like us to record it for our video channel. At this point, we're just doing one Piano Music She Writes video monthly, the first Saturday or Wednesday every month. But who knows? We may revamp that rhythm and do more often, because there are so many beautiful things being sent to us. So thank you for initiating that contact, because that's what's led us to be able to meet up and have a nice chat. And were there any particular questions? Hi, I love the work you do. Oh, thanks, Fiona. And I think that's probably to you, Charlotte, your work. But
It
any,
also be to you.
oh, we're all wonderful. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
But any questions from anybody watching who's still here? It's tricky to type in there and whatnot.
Yeah.
We
There's always a
can,
bit of a delay as well, isn't there?
yeah, we can always, wait. Look at that. There are more. What is this one? Congrats, Charlotte. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the rest, but I can't wait to listen to the Nocturne.
Thank you.
And Erica says, oh, yeah, that's right. I need to learn that beach piece. No pressure. We were thinking one of us would do the one Hermit Thrush at dawn and the other one at dusk. The coordination of that.
Lovely.
Anyway, at some point. So yes, I just want to finish. Thank you, Charlotte, for being a part of our project and for stepping up and being interested in this chat as well today. It was really, really lovely to get to know you a bit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right.
And, yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Someday when we can cross oceans again easily, then maybe we could have tea together.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We can talk in real life.
Yeah.
Talk piano in real life.
That would be lovely.
Definitely.
So all the best
thanks for recording my Nocturne as well. It was lovely. Thank you.
Well, it was fun. So all the best, and thank you everyone for showing up and listening. And this will sit on our Instagram page, this video. So if you want to share it with anybody, it'll be there. And we hope to be successful in moving it over to our YouTube channel as well. But last week's chat failed something was wrong with the Instagram link, and so we never could get that transferred over. So let's hope for the best on this one. So,
yeah, fingers crossed.
Anyway, okay, so
Lovely.
we'll see you another time. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank
Ciao
you.
for now.
Bye.
Bye.